All right. Sorry for the kind of um, boring intro here. All right. I guess that's it. Welcome to Rise Above Group Coaching with Noel Bagwell. Um, I, I'm going to look here in the LinkedIn event and see if anyone has submitted any last minute questions or comments or anything about the event. Just to remind everybody, if you're joining these group coaching sessions every week from 10:30 to noon, and I hope you will, the way you get questions answered is just by posting a question in the chat for the event or by making a comment on the event. So you can go to the event on LinkedIn, put in a comment, or if you join the event on LinkedIn, there's like a little comment section on the right. There are three tabs at the top. One is about, and it just talks about the event. The next one is the comments tab, and then the networking tab where you can see all the other people who signed up for the event. So I also know that a lot of people that join the event do it on the replay. They don't do it live. So if you want to get your question answered in the event, make sure that you get it answered while I'm live, right? And then you need to post your comment ahead of the start time. You can really do it anytime, or even send me a message on LinkedIn. I don't have any new messages on LinkedIn right now, so I don't have any private questions. Um, there we go. Sorry, just double checking to make sure that I have some questions ready to answer. Today, I'm going to be talking about the currency to lead in terms of resilient leadership. I also want to talk a little bit about a legal thing because this brand, Counsel and Clarity, is legal on one side and resilient leadership coaching on the other side. So I do offer preventive law for startups and growth stage companies. So I can help people basically as a fractional or part-time chief legal officer. That's my jam normally. And then I also do resilient leadership coaching, both for individuals and teams. So if you're interested in that or you want some of that, hit the contact thing. Let's see, right here. There's up here. There's a little contact me QR code, and you can get my contact information. And I'm more than happy to connect with you, give you a free consultation, talk about your needs. But the legal thing that I want to talk about is the Corporate Transparency Act that just went into effect. I'm finding out here at the beginning of February, and that most of my clients that I talk to about this, until I bring it to their attention, they're not aware that the Corporate Transparency Act exists, much less the fact that they have to comply with it. Historically, I've done a ton of business formation work for clients, and that usually entails helping them choose the correct legal entity for their business, which is what my first book is mostly about. It also helps them. I mean, it also involves helping them like register their LLC or corporation or limited partnership or whatever they've got with the state, and then I help them comply with various other startup legal issues. Something that you have to do now that you never had to do before January 1st of 2024, a brand new requirement for all businesses in the United States and foreign companies doing business in the United States, is the disclosure of what's called beneficial owner information to FinCEN, FINCEN, FinCEN.gov. They're the Financial Crimes Enforcement Division of the Department of Treasury. So basically, the government passed a law that said no hiding who you are behind a corporate entity. That's gone now. Like no more business owner privacy, basically. So business owner privacy was just destroyed, um, to the extent that that was a thing. And really, you can't like hide with shell companies inside of shell companies inside of shell. you have to report the natural person who owns, like, all the way down. You have to report. And it's called BOI reporting, beneficial owner information reporting. And it's not hard. I've done this with a client or two. I've gone through the I've gone through the online filing of the BOI report. It's really, for small businesses, it's easy to comply with because usually they don't have very many owners. So you need to do it. If you don't do it, then you're going to get fined probably. You just don't want to get crossways with Department of Treasury. It's just not a great idea. So if you want help with complying with the beneficial owner information reporting requirements of the new Corporate Transparency Act, reach out to me. I'm more than happy to help you with that. Happy to walk you through what that entails. For businesses that existed prior to January 1st of 2024, you have a year to comply. You have 1 year to get into compliance. For businesses that were formed this year or later, so after January 1st, 2024, you have 30 days. So new business formation, new owners, they have 30 days to get into compliance with the Corporate Transparency Act. So that's not a huge amount of time to comply. So I would just, if you're a new business and you're watching this for some reason, so on YouTube or wherever, you just tuned into the stream, take it from a preventive business lawyer. It's better to tackle that on the front end than on the back end. So that's sort of my little legal pro tip for the day. I think I probably should start these live streams with something like that, like a little legal tip. I mostly, in the first three streams, the last 3 weeks that I've been doing the Rise Above group coaching thing, I haven't really focused too much on the legal side of everything. So probably should balance it out a little more. I've been mostly focused on the resilient leadership coaching stuff, and the primary reason for that is that I've written this book. It's called Lead Again, a modern guide to resilience. You can buy the book. It's available now. You order it on Amazon, it'll show up. The publication date is the 29th of February because it's a leap year, and that's pretty cool. So I set the publication date to the 29th of February, also just to make sure that I had a chance to order some proofs, review them, sign them for the people that are in the acknowledgement section of the book, make any like last minute changes and adjustments, and then send that out to the publisher before like it's basically the final first edition. So if you are lucky enough to have one of these physical books, this copy, you have a limited edition collector's item in your possession because you'll never see this content again. Not exactly the way that it is. The chapter titles, many, if not most of the chapter titles have changed. Hopefully, this little printing misalignment will be fixed in the next one because for whatever reason, this printed too close to the back cover. Just some other little minor adjustments and modifications. There is more content in the book now because when I went through and I adjusted things like, I think it's chapter 27, the Fit to Lead, that talks about the importance of physical fitness, particularly also mental fitness, but physical fitness for leaders. There's like all the citations were still there. They were there in the end notes, but the little superscript numerals for the end notes were missing from the chapter. So I had to go back and fix that, and had to just kind of go through the book and I just did another pass. I hated the preface and the introduction, so I rewrote them. They're both better now. And I went through and kind of tightened up and fine-tuned some of the language, especially in the first few chapters, because I had not done as much editing on those. when I ordered the first case of books. So, and then also I fixed the copyright so it doesn't say 2023 anymore, like it did in the working title of the book. Now it says 2024, as it should, and as it always should have. Um, so yeah, adventures in self-publishing. For those of you who tune in and you've been kind of following the self-publishing journey that I've been on with this book, thank you for your interest in the book. The final first edition copy is a little bit better. Frankly, it's a little bit better than the first 18 copies, but not so much so that like the message is different, or it's going to really read all that different in most places. Like a very few places, you'll just have more clarity in the new version of the book. But I'm saying substantially the same things, and I'm actually really pleased. I was really pleased with the first case of books that I ordered, and I only have two copies left. So I've sold them all. I had a person who ordered an entire case of the book, but they haven't paid for their order yet. So if that's you, please reach out to me and let's take care of that. You can order through me directly. So if you want a copy of the book, or if you want multiple copies for your team, you can order that directly from me. I can give you special deals, special pricing, value adds, and other things. So if you're interested in that, and you want like signed copies, certainly if you want signed copies, you need to order them directly from me. I'm happy to sign as many copies of the book as you order. And if you think, I'm going to get him, I'm going to make him sign 1,000 copies of the book, great. I'll do it. I'll don't threaten me with a good time. So I will absolutely do that. If you want to order 1,000 copies of the book, fine, I'll sign them all. That sounds great. But yeah, all the final edits for the book are done. Thank you so much to the people who ordered like the first case, who ordered books from the first case, the first print run. That has been such an encouragement, and I've been so happy to put all of those copies in people's hands. And if you want one of the very first the printing run ones, the very first ones, I have two. I have two left. So will you get one of them? It's up to you. Let me know if you want it. If you want to get it from Amazon, you can just go ahead and order it on Amazon. I am going to be at an event at the public library in Clarksville, Tennessee in March. And they're doing a local authors event, and I am going to be there, and I'm going to sign copies of my book for people, and just meet and mingle with other local authors and readers who are interested in what we're doing. So if you'd like to meet me, you can come to the public library in Clarksville in March. I'm sure next week or whenever I have more information from the library about the details of the event, I'll share them in the live stream, I'm sure. So this theme, I mean, this session's theme is going to be about the currency to lead. So I think that it's a like I don't like thinking of relationships as transactional, right? I used to. It made the emotional complexity of human relationships seem simpler and easier to get my head around. I wanted to make sure that I was able to connect with people. That's always been really important to me, and I didn't always feel like I was fully connecting. Not because I wasn't showing up or bringing value in the relationship, but because I didn't always know whether or not other people understood me, understood what I was trying to say, or believed. Like connected. Like I didn't feel buy-in from other people all the time, and I think that bothered me because it made me feel like they didn't really trust me. And trust is it's like, well, if nobody else trusts me, or if not enough other people, or however many, I mean, it sort of like raises all kinds of weird questions. But if people don't trust you, it kind of makes you think, well, should I trust myself? And you can, if you really overthink that, as I'm prone to overthinking, there's this weird there's this weird phenomenon that happens where you kind of start to question your own perception and understanding of reality. And you might think, well, that sounds like a lot like gaslighting. It is. It is. When you should have trust, or when you feel you should have trust from people in your life, like close relationships, family members, close friends, a spouse, whatever, a child, a best friend, whatever. You feel like they should trust you, but they don't. And you know that you are honest with them. You're like, well, I'm always above board. I speak with integrity. I'm forthright. I'm whatever. They should trust me, but they still don't. It can mess with you. It can really mess with your head, and you can start to. It's hard to tell. Like there's a fine line, and I'm sure every relationship and circumstance is different, but it's hard to tell whether you're gaslighting yourself to a degree, if that's a thing. I don't know, or the other person is, right? But in any event, the effect is the same. You start to question your perception, your own understanding of reality. Like, well, maybe I think things are this way, but really they're not, and maybe I need to proceed with a little more caution. And I think really manipulative people who know that withholding like the kind of emotional intimacy and trust from you in a relationship, they know the effect that that has, and they do it anyway. I think that's malicious and abusive. So, if you've got someone in your life and that's the situation, you need to address that with them and draw a boundary, or fix the relationship if they will participate. You can't always do that. You can't always repair the relationship, especially if they're not willing to do it. But if it's possible, you should. But long ago, before I like had a better understanding of like how to build human connections and maintain them and make them healthy and emotionally safe for everybody involved, I kind of thought of trust as a currency. And I think there is value in that perception. I wouldn't reduce all of human relationships to transactions, um, or trust as a concept to being merely a currency. That said, in the context of leadership, and this is really delicate, right? Because I don't want to create a misapprehension, misunderstanding for anybody. But in the context of leadership, you definitely do need trust, and you definitely can think of it as a currency. And in a very limited scope, you can say, well, if I don't have enough trust in my account with the other person, if I haven't saved up that, if I haven't contributed that, if I haven't funded the account of our relationship, metaphorically speaking, with enough trust and built that up on their end, well then I haven't given them the resources they need to then buy in to the agenda that I have, the goals that I've set, the ideas that I think are important. You need to earn that. So, like when I was growing up as a kid, my parents and teachers would say, "You have to do this," and I'd say, "Why?" And they'd say, "Well, because I'm in charge. I'm in authority. I have authority over you." And I'd be like, "Okay." And that, why? Who says? Why should I? Authority is one of those things that it either comes from force or from consent. They wanted me to consent, right? My parents, my teachers wanted me to consent to do things the way that they wanted them done. But ultimately, when they had not built up enough trust currency with me, if they hadn't done what it took with me to persuade me, to get me to trust that their way of doing things was best and in my best interest, and I would like it, and things are going to be ultimately good. Like if they hadn't done that work, it would just revert to force. Well, do this or I'm going to spank you. Do this or you're going to get detention. Do this or whatever negative consequences they could force. And if you fight that enough, it comes down to a physical a physical altercation, right? It comes down to might makes right. And so too with pretty much every human relationship. Like, you can either govern by fear with force and violence backing it up, or you can create buy-in and get people's consent. If you if you govern others that are under your authority or supposed authority, right? If you're in a position that's supposed to carry with it a degree of respect and authority, and you want to lead other people in that position, you absolutely can't do it with force. You cannot do it with rules. You cannot do it with punishments. You just can't. That only goes so far. That only goes so far as you're able to create, other incentives that they will say, well, to get that reward, I will put up with this. And, it's kind of a constant cost benefit analysis. You're constantly assessing trade-offs. And everything at that point is already really transactional for the follower, at least, if not the leader as well. And that becomes more about management and managing resources and power dynamics than anything else. And it gets really, really complicated and really messy. But leadership is different from management. And whenever you engage in all of the governing with fear, the punishments, the rules, the roles, and all that stuff, when you do that, you are no longer leading. At that point, you're managing. You're managing. It's not leadership, it's management. There's nothing wrong with management. There's a place for management, especially in corporate America, corporate contexts, etc. But if all you're doing ever is managing, who's leading? I mean, anybody? And people need that. People need leadership. They need self-leadership, they need, corporate leadership, they need community leadership, family leadership, spiritual leadership. People need it. We're designed to be social creatures, and we look for someone with real authority. And that authority, if it is genuine, derives not from rules and punishments, but from consent. And the only way that you're going to get someone else's consent, like real, authentic, genuine consent, is if they trust you. And you have to earn that trust. It can't just come, you can't just say, you should trust me because I'm your dad. You should trust me because I'm your mom. You should trust me because I'm your teacher and God put me in authority over you. So if you don't trust me, you're not trusting God. Okay, you know, maybe, but a 6-year-old is not gonna be like, well, show me God. Let me talk to him. May I please speak to your supervisor? I mean, that's a kid who doesn't know any better and hasn't really had a chance to develop like a sincere, thoughtful like faith, right? And who actually buys into the premise that God did put them in authority over them and, intends for you to obey every single one of their dictates and whims, right? If you don't buy into that premise, it's just like, well, good luck getting any kind of consent from that kid, right? So a thoughtful person and an intelligent person may question your premises, and you have to be able to address that in a meaningful way that's satisfactory to them. Otherwise, you're not going to earn their trust. You're not going to get their consent, and they're not going to buy in to what you want them to do. Um, it's funny how this transactional notion first came up for me, this transactional framework or idea about human relationships. My dad used to say, and still I've heard him say, friends are like money in the bank. I've never really been entirely comfortable with how transactional that felt because um, there's a cynical part of me that says, that treats people like commodities to be used, and I don't like that. And so that's why I'm trying to be really delicate here, because I know that is not what my dad means. He does not mean people are commodities. There are few other people on this planet who I know who have more friends than my dad, like authentic friends. It seems like everywhere he goes, he knows somebody. He's always been kind of like one of the popular people, and people like him. He's very friendly. He goes out of his way, it seems, to have conversations even with strangers. So I know he has a genuine altruistic care and concern for other people and would not treat them as commodities. So I know he has to be talking about something else. And as I've been, thinking about that, him saying that over the course of my life, um, I've decided that the little aphorism, friends are like money in the bank, kind of speaks to the value of the relationship itself and how important and valuable it is for there to be mutual trust, and how that opens up mutual support, where if you trust someone else, then they can get you to do things, they can get you to help them, they can get you to contribute to a cause, to participate in the community for the benefit of all, because you trust that what they're doing is good and valuable and useful. And likewise, if they trust you, you can motivate them to do some other things. And the more of this currency, the more of this trust you exchange, the better off you both are. Like your accounts both go up. It's not a zero sum game. So it's not like there's a finite quantity of trust. In fact, the more you exchange trust, the more trust you generate. So it's almost like by exchanging trust with other people, you build it up more and more and more. You create more of it as if by magic out of thin air, just by exchanging it. So it does require, kind of like in a business venture, it requires someone to make an initial investment, to have some seed capital there, right? Like, I'm gonna take a risk. And Ronald Reagan said, trust but verify. And I think you can take a calculated trust risk on a person. You can kind of do the cost benefit analysis. And at the beginning, it may start with something that looks a lot like management, like resource management. Well, I have this incentive to take a risk on this person. That's not real trust. That's trying to go after the incentive, right? That's cost benefit analysis. You're really managing a pool of potential resources. But then it works out, right? And you think, oh, that person really did have, you start to believe, you start to have faith that that person really did have your best interest at heart. They really did have good intentions toward you. You start to, you know them and you like them, and then that leads to trust. You understand a little more what they're all about, and um, you had something good happen to you because you did what they suggested you do. And so the next time it's a little bit easier. And what makes it easier, the essence of the increased easiness, it's, I mean, you could go back to the paradigm before, and you could probably do more logical, strictly logical, cynical, like resource management, cost benefit analysis. The second time you could, you might decide to trust them, or you might decide not to, right? Or I shouldn't say trust. You might decide to engage in what they're trying to get you to do, or you might not, right? But what makes it easier is the fact that you've generated a little bit of trust in that relationship. And then they might trust, and then if they reflect some trust in you as well, or they just take a big risk just because they're not very risk averse sometimes, right? They trust you. Well, then that built, like, the fact of someone else trusting you seems to generate its own kind of trust. It's really, really interesting. Like, be mindful and be intentional and aware about trust dynamics. You'll see, I think, as I have, that in leadership, trust is like money in the bank. You might say friends are like money in the bank, trust is like money in the bank, but trust is like money in the bank of each, but you've got a bank for each individual person, an account with each individual person. I think if you are struggling to lead, I'm not talking about management, remember. If you're struggling to lead, it's because you are broke as the 10 commandments. You have nothing in your account with the other person. Um, as far as your potential followers are concerned, your account has been drained of trust, or just it's never built up in the first place. So if you want to be a great leader and have lots of followers, you need to go kind of from rags to riches. You need to um, you need to start building up the currency of trust. So, how do you do that? This is group coaching on resilient leadership and specifically on generating trust in this issue. But before I tackle I've got six ways that a person can build up the currency of trust. These are kind of tried and true things. But just remember, like, if something's too good to be true, then it probably is. So if any of this sounds like, well, that wouldn't work because it just obviously wouldn't work because of this. I mean, maybe you're right, maybe you're wrong about your objection. I don't know. I don't know what it is, but maybe give it a try. But if it does seem just way too good to be true, it probably is, right? I If you've got some other way of building trust that someone else has sold you on outside of these six things, and that seems too good to be true, and it just hasn't really been working out for you, you might have been taken for a ride. Might be a get rich quick scheme in terms of trust building, right? Before I dive into these six things, though, um, I want to talk about. I want to answer a question, and then I also want to talk about the importance of rapport. So we've got about an hour left in the session, and I'm just going to quickly, before I dive into the question in front of me, I'm just going to check over here, kind of refresh the page on the LinkedIn event, and see if anyone's submitted a question about what I've been talking about so far. Looks like no, there are no new questions in the feed. But I'm here, guys. I'm here in the LinkedIn event, and we're also live on YouTube and Instagram and X and Facebook. So from wherever you're tuning in, if you want to ask a question, head over to LinkedIn and jump into the event there, and that's where you can submit your question. I guess I could check the messages on the other platforms, but I'm just not. It's just too much. I think there is even an integrated chat actually here that can pull in comments from everywhere else, and I don't see anything there either. So since we don't have anything else, I've got a kind of a prepared question from that was submitted ahead of time, and we'll just dive into that one since there's nobody who's live. I always want to prioritize the live stuff over stuff that people submitted first because I want to reward that engagement. So here we go. How can leaders identify when their trust account is low, and what steps can they take to deposit more trust into their relationships with their team and their stakeholders? That's really great. Well, I think the issue is kind of, as we've discussed, consent, right? Like, if you are having to threaten or cajole or harass, to, like, not harass, but like nag, right? If you're just like pestering, if you have to pester someone to get anything done, if people are not doing what you want them to do proactively, if they're not like eagerly and with their own energy, like if they're not highly motivated self-starters, to use the corporate jargon, with respect to what you want them to do, then they probably don't trust you because they don't want to do what you want them to do. And that's how you can tell that you're just managing. Where you're leading, just imagine them as a small child. We have all these mental tricks, right? Like, for public speakers, they say if you're nervous about public speaking, imagine the audience in their underwear or something, and you're like, haha, that's, it basically flips that feeling of vulnerability. What makes people nervous about public speaking is they feel very vulnerable, they feel very exposed, everybody's looking at them, and what if they mess up? But then if you imagine everybody else in a very vulnerable and compromising kind of situation, then it kind of mentally balances out the vulnerability, and you're all peers again. So you can do a similar kind of trick to figure out whether or not you're managing or leading. Imagine that the person following you, and by the way, this exercise has so many, it's so layered, it's like an onion. It's just, there's so much value all the way down. I love doing this exercise. So imagine that your potential follower, your employee, your subordinate, whatever, whoever they are, imagine they are a small child, like three, right? A 2-year-old, a 3-year-old, a 4-year-old, really great. And if you don't have enough experience with really small children like this to be able to effectively do it, um, maybe talk to a niece or a nephew. Maybe talk to um, maybe volunteer at church or something to work with in the nursery or in a Sunday school class or something like that. Maybe get involved in some way where you will interact with a little kid in a wholesome and safe environment, right? So get some experience, because little kids, I mean, I'm telling you, children are our spiritual teachers. They will teach you so much. But imagine that the person that you're trying to lead is a small child, and what you're trying to get them to do is like going to bed or eating their vegetables or stopping a favorite activity that they're engaged in to go take a potty break before they have an accident. Right? Kids can have amazing focus when they are engaged, and they get into flow states so easily, whenever it's something that they love. But then something that they don't like, they resist as if it is an existential threat, as if it's going to kill them. Right? I don't want to go to bed. They treat going to bed like dying. It's as if they die every day and they are reborn anew with each new day. Which is kind of Zen wisdom, right? Like we are reborn again with each new day, is actually a Zen aphorism, axiom. So maybe there's some wisdom to that. I'm telling you, children are our spiritual teachers. But imagine that the person you're trying to lead is like one of these small children. They want what they want, and they don't want what they don't want. How do you get that small child who's very simple and they're thinking, well, I mean, they're geniuses, right? But they're like all of them, but because their mental plasticity is just off the charts. But they're kind of creative geniuses. They're not always like logical reasoning, cause and effect geniuses. And you, as the leader, you see something far in the future. You see a pattern, you're familiar, you have the wisdom and the experience to see something that they either need to attain or avoid. And you see all the steps to get them there. They don't see all of that. They just see the short term, like right now, today, the thing that they're in. And what they may like what they're in, or they may not like what they're in. And that's all they can see. They may not see the wisdom in pushing through to get to the goal, or stopping what they're doing before something really bad happens. They may not see all of that, because like little children, they just see their immediate circumstance or their immediate environment or the immediate cause and effect of a change. You see the long-term thing, and you're trying to lead them long-term in a better direction. How do you get them to want what you want? You have to, that's the rapport thing. That means you have to stop. You have to pause. You have to take a holy pause, right? A sacred pause. Slow way down and listen to them. Listening is an act of trust. It's an act of receptivity. It's an act of allowing the other person in. Now, you may already know what they're going to say. You may not. Don't try to read their mind. Don't get in a hurry. The faster things move, the less people listen, and the more you are depending on whether or not they already trust you. Right? So if things are moving really fast, it's because there's already a high degree of trust. We already know where we're going. We're building momentum. We're following that guy. We're all doing the thing. And things move really fast, and that's great. But if there's no trust, and you're like, come on, it's like dragging a donkey. Like, come on, donkey. And the donkey's like, no. Story of Balaam and the donkey is really great for this, but I may not have time for that. You can go just Google Balaam, Balam, and the donkey, and read that story. It's from the Old Testament, and it will make you question whether the Old Testament writers may have been tripping balls, like doing some acid or something like that. They were Interesting people, no doubt, but some of the stories are like, wow, that either happened and the world is way more weird than I know, than I realize, or these guys were way more weird than we realize who wrote this. Porque no los dos. But back to building rapport, right? You need to slow way down, right, and build trust. Because if you're trying to drag the donkey or you're trying to pull the other person, you can't do that quickly. You have to stop. Building rapport is something that is essential for anybody who really wants to build trust, and so therefore it's essential for every single leader. And rapport is something that goes beyond a surface level agreement or comprehension. It can't just be pro forma. Rapport is about connection and engagement, and people who are in rapport with each other, they influence each other and they respond to each other very effectively. Rapport is a gateway for intersubjective transactions. Nobody, both people admit, nobody believes, and both people admit that they do not have a monopoly on the true understanding of objective reality. They understand that, at least to a degree, they see things subjectively, the other person sees things subjectively, and they each value the other person because they recognize that, because, like, I don't have a monopoly on the true understanding of objective reality, therefore there may be some parts of reality that I'm missing out on. And someone else with a different perspective may be seeing some things that I'm not seeing. And so they value the other person's subjective perspective. The other person's doing the same thing. They both are hoping that the other one will fill in some of the stuff in their individual blind spots. And they're both usually right. And that is why intersubjective rapport is extremely valuable, right? We get to see more because we're, to a degree, empathetically seeing through the eyes of others. And so rapport is a gateway through which we can intersubjectively transact with one another. And this establishes and nurtures trust. And listening is the first part of that. And I don't just mean listening to their words. So you can't do it with a text message. You can't build rapport really well with text messages. So you got to get out of the realm of just iMessage or email or whatever. Those are really poor ways to create rapport. You need to have at least something where you can see each other, like FaceTime or Zoom. If you can be in the same room together, that's ideal, because most of communication is body language, it's tone of voice. It's not just what's said, it's how you say it and how you're showing up, with what energy are you showing up. So a really good starting point to improve how you listen is to read a book, How to Speak, How to Listen by Mortimer J. Adler. Absolutely classic. Should be required reading in every single education program, every single high school or middle school program. You definitely should have had to read How to Speak, How to Listen, but you may not have ever even heard of it. Adler writes in this book, he says, the meeting of two minds may consist in their understanding of one another while still in disagreement. Read that again. The meeting of two minds may consist in their understanding of one another while still in disagreement. Just because someone disagrees with you, that doesn't mean that they don't understand you. It's interesting when I go back and I think about and I read or reread like transcripts of speeches from Barack Obama. One of the interesting assumptions that is embedded in a lot of his thinking that he's communicated in his speeches is that when people don't agree with him, they don't understand. They just don't understand him. That's just not true. And a lot of people do this. I'm not picking on Barack Obama. Bless his heart, I'm not picking on him. I believe that a lot of people, and a lot of really intelligent people, make this mistake. Super smart people. In fact, I think the more intelligent you are, the more prone you are to making this mistake. Oh, you just don't understand. You just don't agree with me because you just don't understand. First of all, incredibly condescending. Second of all, that's not always true. Sometimes people do understand, they just don't agree, right? And he also presents another alternative. He says, or the meeting of two minds may consist in their coming into agreement as a result of their understanding one another. But both options are viable. Two people might perfectly understand each other and still disagree, or they might understand each other and agree. I shouldn't say perfectly understand. I don't think we ever perfectly understand another person, but understand well enough, right? It's not necessarily true that if we all just perfectly understood each other, then we would all agree. That's not true. So, agreement is not required for a meeting of the minds. Active engagement, however, is indispensable. It's an indispensable part or component of rapport. It's a vital foundation for trust building. And active engagement means listening. So if you're having trouble leading, I'm here to tell you you're probably having trouble listening. If you're having trouble leading, you're probably having trouble listening. Um, Adler shares this other important idea about conversations, and it kind of ties into this topic of building trust. He said, all impersonal conversations, whether theoretical or practical in aim, should strive to conclude with a meeting of minds in one or the other form in which that can be achieved. So he's talking about whether you're just theorizing and you're thinking about ways things might be, you're sort of speculating about things, or you're really trying to get something done. And you're like hang a picture or something like that, right? With you hang a picture with your spouse, right? And has there ever been anything that's tested a marriage more? Um, but if you can hang a picture with your spouse and do it like with no disagreement, not a crossword, no sarcasm or passive aggressive behavior, anything like that, if you can both cheerfully, beginning to end, hang a picture together, your relationship's probably pretty good. That's been my experience, right? If you can't hang a picture together, there's probably something for you guys to improve. But whether it's theoretical or practical, you should try to end with a meeting of the minds, not necessarily agreement, but understanding. And he says practical conversations are often unsuccessful because misunderstanding prevents them from reaching a decision. Misunderstanding prevents them from reaching a decision. You don't have to have total agreement to have enough consent to reach a decision. And this is important for the next step. Remember, we're talking about the currency of trust and how to lead other people by building up enough trust to create buy-in and get their consent to lead so that they do it willingly and cheerfully, right? Or at least willingly, not because they're being coerced or threatened or having carrots dangled in front of them, that sort of thing, right? But you do need to build up enough understanding that they then will consent enough to reach a decision. It's not all or nothing. It's at the margins. How much do you have? And Adler finishes this little passage. He says, even with sufficient understanding present, disagreement can block the way to action. So, what you need is enough understanding to get enough agreement to get to a decision. And that's, you have to go for rapport. I think personal conversations should also aim for a meeting of the minds. I think that's very rewarding, and I think that's a great way. Those personal conversations, those interactions, the things that seem to come really naturally to my dad, even with strangers. Those sorts of things can build up a lot of trust because they build up a lot of liking. The personal conversations, though, you can't overweight that, and you can't rely too much on that because there's a cognitive bias, right, called the halo effect. And if people are following you just because they really like you, um, for example, if you're on Instagram, right, and you have 250,000 followers, but it's because you're a young, pretty girl and you post pictures of yourself scantily clad and that sort of thing. You have a lot of followers. You have a lot of people who definitely will listen to you, who like you, and some of them who may even like do a bunch of things for you. But it's because of the halo effect. It's because you have cognitively biased them. You've rewarded them a lot, and they just like you and they want something from you. Your relationship is still transactional there. You're not really leading. So to call those people on Instagram followers is really misleading. You don't really have as much influence as you think you do because the relationship is transactional. They're not really following you because they are motivated by mutual understanding and rapport. They're not really motivated to follow you no matter where you lead because they actually trust you. They just want something from you, and you're largely giving it to them for free. So I mean, I'm not going to go any further with that discussion, but there are lots of logical inferences that can be made there. So I'm just going to leave that alone. You just want to be careful of the halo effect, right? Um, how much you dislike someone also can influence your judgment of them. So the inverse corollary is true too, right? Like you can have all the right answers in the world, and if people hate your guts, they will not listen to you. So if you are offensive and unpalatable, you have kind of an objectionable personality. Doesn't matter if you're right. Doesn't matter if you're a Nobel Prize winner. Doesn't matter if you're a genius. Does not matter if you are God's gift to mankind, cognitively, rationally, logically. If people hate you, they won't listen to you. So at the margins, likability matters, but you don't want people to follow you because of the halo effect, and you certainly don't want people to ignore you because they hate you. So you need to manage likability as a resource, but not make it everything. In our society, our attention driven, where we've basically commoditized attention, that's one of the big problems is that we're not really thinking well, and we're not really understanding each other. We're not really listening to each other, and we don't really follow people or lead people authentically because most of our interpersonal human interactions have been reduced to the halo effect or its inverse. It just comes down to popularity contest. So if you want to build real leadership, how do you really connect with the people that are on your team, that you want to follow you? How do you create real dedicated followers? There's not a shortcut. There's not a trick. There's no magic here. I've already given you sort of how do you open the door, and that's by building rapport with people. That means pausing and listening. So here are the 6 things, the 6 facets of trust building. The first thing is authentic communication. So this involves engaging with them actively, expressing yourself authentically, and then cultivating that rapport. So you have to have authentic communication. That is very, very difficult to do one to many. It is much easier to do one-on-one. So it's a slow process usually. It takes a lot of time. When I was going through the Dent Global Key Person of Influence program, one of the things that I learned was the 7-11-4 rule. That most people, if they want to buy something from you, they have 7 different points of engagement with you on up to 4 platforms, and tend to spend about 11 hours engaging with you, whether it's videos or audio or a book that they've read or blog articles that you've written, whatever. But it's about 11 hours of content that they consume on over 7 different points of engagement on up to 4 different platforms. But if you are present on 4 platforms and you have opportunities for 7 points of engagement, you have 11 hours of content out there. A person that is right at the center, the sweet spot of your target demographic, right? They're likely to buy from you. So I say that to say you can build rapport one to many, and without an individual personal interaction with that person, you can. It's possible, but it's not ideal. It's not optimal to do that. That shouldn't be the goal. The goal should be to have authentic interpersonal dialogue with that person, authentic communication with each person, to sit down, look them in the eye, listen to their needs, and then speak to that in a way that's honest. Um, Value contribution, right? Consistently provide valuable insights and assistance to other people. If you're giving, now again, this could just air whatever on the side of resource management. It could. So we don't just want to be doing resource management here. We don't just want to be dangling carrots. We don't want to just lead with a, walk quietly and carry a heavy stick, right? A big stick. We don't want to do that. That's not what value and contribution is all about. What value and contribution is all about is making sure that you're showing up with something valuable so that other people will trust, right? Trustworthy associations is another thing. This again is kind of a dangerous thing. Like each one of these things have to be understood with nuance. But trustworthy associations, are you aligning yourself with reliable and respected individuals or groups? The halo effect does matter. And so if you are aligning yourself with a lot of reliable and respectable groups and people, then because of the halo effect, people are more likely to trust you. Likewise, if you are a physicist and you are like a big flat earther, no, you're going to have no credibility. Like that'll tank your credibility instantly. People are just not going to take you seriously because your views are easily debunked. So you got to watch out who you roll with, right? It does matter. It's not all or nothing. Like if you're a physicist and you are a part of a group of flat earthers, it's possible that some of your views really are valid and have merit and you have interesting questions to ask and so on, right? But ultimately, because you have aligned yourself with a kind of an absurd view of the universe, and one that's easily disproven, ultimately you're going to lack mainstream credibility, and like even your valid views are going to be discounted, and that may seem unfair to you, and it may even be unfair. I don't know, right? I'm not here to judge all of that. I'm just here to say, if you want more credibility as a physicist, extract yourself from from the flat Earth crowd, and likewise in any other discipline, right? If something is seen as fringe or weird or whatever, while it's good to be compassionate and open-minded and receptive to everybody's views to the degree that you can, you don't necessarily want to be associated if you're trying to attract like mainstream interest and trust. You don't want to be associated with a lot of fringe groups because that can at the margins um, make people like you less and trust you less. You do also want to have shared values. Shared values are an important facet of trust building. And I would argue among the most. Imagine the parent and the child that we talked about. The parent says, "You should trust me, believe me, and do what I say willingly, cheerfully, with a good attitude, because God put me in authority over you." At the point where the child adopts that, where the child like understands what God is or who God is to them, loves God, trusts God, wants to do what God wants them to do. In other words, they have faith. And they also believe the premise that God chose their parent for them. That it wasn't random, it wasn't an accident. There's no other more plausible explanation, but that God wants that parent to raise that child this way, because ultimately that's what will be best for the child. At that point, the child will accept the argument that I should obey my mom and dad because God loves me and put me in this home. And even if it's hard or I can't understand why, or it seems like really like they're not doing what they're supposed to do as a parent or whatever, right? Nevertheless, this is my journey and I should accept it. I mean, I don't have to like it or even agree with it, but I will accept it and I will consent, cooperate. So when the parent and the child have the shared values, you might say, well, that's wrong or that's spiritually abusive. You can judge all of that whole dynamic all you want to. You can judge it 6 ways to Sunday. Don't care, right? The point is, because the child and the parent have shared values at that point, The inarguable truth is the child will consent because they have enough shared values, right? So it's like a magnet. Shared values is like a magnet. You just, it attracts, and all the little grooves, they all fit together like puzzle pieces, and it's really hard to pull them apart. So, shared values, transparency. If you are sharing relevant information, being really open about your intentions, um, you're not hiding anything, you're not being shifty. If you, is it easier to trust your spouse if they are really privacy conscious around you and they are really secretive and really private about their devices, their phone, their tablet, their laptop? They don't even want to give you their code to their streaming service of choice, right? I don't want to give you my PIN number for that. That's secret. That's I got to keep that private for me, right? Then never let you see their bank account. There's no transparency whatsoever. It's like, well, that's my business. That's my personal whatever, and blah, blah, blah. They get all up in their feelings about it every time any kind of issue of privacy comes up. If they're your spouse, it's normal for you to go, "What are you hiding?" And they're like, "Well, why do you think I'm hiding anything? I just privacy. It's privacy, privacy, privacy. Boundaries. You need to have boundaries. Respect my boundaries and my privacy." We're married. We sleep together. We have kids together. We live in the same house. I've trusted you with my entire life, and I've committed to live with you for my entire life and share with you everything, for better, for worse, for richer, for poor, in sickness and in health, till death do us part. So we're kind of in this all together. And also, if you're a Christian, at least, you believe that when you get married, you become one person. So you're literally hiding some stuff from another part of yourself. The very definition of cognitive dissonance. It is very, very, very weird to have like strong privacy protocols and boundaries that compartmentalize parts of your life with respect to your spouse. The normal thing to do is to be completely transparent where there is no privacy. There is no reasonable expectation of privacy in a marriage. Typically, the law also in the past has recognized that there's no reasonable expectation of privacy between spouses because you're one person. You're one person. Why would you? It'd be like you keeping stuff from you. That's dumb. And where should we have the most trust and rapport? In our marriages, in our spousal relationships, right? And so the way that you cultivate trust and rapport there is with a high degree of transparency, sharing relevant information, being open about your intentions. That's a great way to build trust and to build rapport. It almost torpedoes, and well, not almost, it torpedoes and it sabotages trust when you hide the ball, especially on things that are relevant and things that have to do with your intentions. If you're like, I don't want to tell you why. Why do you want to do this? I don't want to tell you why. Well, then I don't trust you. I don't know what kind of nefarious game you're playing. I don't know what you're up to. So I don't trust you because you won't tell me why you want to do this. That there was nothing that will torpedo trust faster than lack of transparency about intentions and lack of transparency about relevant information. If you can't do that, expect people to distrust you. And they should. They should. Nobody should trust you if you won't be transparent about your intentions and if you won't be transparent about relevant information. You say, that's on a need to know basis and you don't need to know. You should just trust me. Come on. Terrible. Never trust a person like that. They're manipulative, they're liars, and they at best are managers in authority positions or cooperative situations. They're just managing you, right? There's no like co-leading. Like in a marriage, that's what it should be. Co-leading. You are one person that is self-led, which means you both lead in your spheres of complementary expertise, right? It's how complementarianism works. It's why complementarianism works, and it's why marriages with two spouses that both believe that they're each complementary to each other, they both intersubjectively respect one another, they cooperate with each other, have a high degree of transparency, the highest degree of transparency. And then finally, shared interests. This is another one that kind of goes back to the halo effect a little bit, but identifying and engaging with common interests can enhance rapport and trust. But even if you don't like really like the other person, you might share an interest. And so you might have at the margins enough more understanding, enough more agreement to get to a decision, right? And this goes back to valuing the intersubjective exchange, acknowledging with humility that you don't have a monopoly on your perception of objective reality. And so, therefore, the other person's perspective could be valuable. They might see something that you miss. And it's like, well, after all, we're both interested in this thing. What's good for the organization? What's good for the family? We both have an interest in this and we share that. So we're both trying. So that shared interest like aligns you towards a unifying factor. And because you have that, even if you don't like each other, even if you don't already trust each other that much, just acknowledging a shared interest here brings you into closer alignment and allows you to build rapport over a particular thing. So, patience, right? Because 7-Eleven 4, it's going to take them 11 hours of drinking your Kool-Aid, your particular flavor of Kool-Aid. If you want people to buy something from you and you don't want to sit down and have a one-to-one conversation with them, just expect that to take at least 11 hours. That's a slow process. That's a slow burn, right? But sitting down with someone, spending time with them, connecting with them, there are very, very few people that I have instantly had rapport with. And I mean, when I say instant, I don't really mean instant because there's nobody that I've instantly had rapport with except like my mom or my grandmother when I was very, very young. And that's because it's hardwired into your neurology, right? It's hardwired into your brain for some people for you to have instant rapport. And that rapport can break down over time. So you gotta manage it. You gotta maintain rapport, right? You have to continue exchanging trust and building up your trust account and not doing things that destroy the trust in the relationship. So if you're going to do this, you have to accept that it's something that's going to happen over time. You're going to do it over a long period of time. So you got to have patience. And the less trust there is inherent in the relationship, or the more precarious the trust is, the easier it is to destroy trust, the more patience you have to have. The old saying, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, or 1 step forward, 2 steps back. Um, if if you're going to be in a situation that's always 1 step forward and 2 steps back, you have to make sure that the forward steps you're taking are at least twice as large as the 2 steps back that you can expect to have to take. You got to take big strides forward and baby steps back because it's going to be 1 step forward, 2 steps back. That, the other person, they just hate you irrationally. And you have to accept that. They just don't like you. You're just not their kind of person, or they've decided that you're not trustworthy for whatever reason. I don't trust you, so and so. Well, why not? Because I think you've got this agenda and I don't like you. I think you're this kind of person. You're toxic. You're a narcissist. You're this person. You're that person. They've slapped all kinds of labels on you. And in your self-awareness, you look at that and you go, how sad. They don't see me. They don't see me at all. And if they could just see me and see that I'm not that kind of person, it wouldn't be this way. And that's so tragic, right? It can be utterly heartbreaking. I've been there more times than I would like to admit, right? So what do? You have patience. You have patience with that person. You slow things down. Take a deep breath and do your best to listen and connect with them, just like you might have to pause with that little kid and say, hey, I know that you love playing this game. What game are you playing? Oh, that's really interesting. How cool. I see what you did there. Man, you're good at that. Tell you what, I don't want to take you away from this. I don't want to take you away from this game, this thing that you're doing right now. I really don't. But if we have an accident, if we don't take a break, a really quick break right now, you're going to have an accident and it's going to take even more time away from your game, right? So why don't we just pause it right here and go take a quick potty break and come back so you don't have an accident, and then you can enjoy your game some more. How does that sound? You see, you're taking their incentives into consideration. You're engaging with what they're focused on, what they're interested in, and you're speaking to their interest, helping them get more of what they want by doing a little bit of what you want. You're building rapport with them. You're showing them that you're engaged, you're listening, you're focused, you care, you have shared values, right? And you're making a valuable contribution. Let me give you more of what you want by doing this one thing over here that you might be a little resistant to. Think about putting together a puzzle. Every piece that you add helps to complete the picture, but you can't like force the pieces where they don't fit. You can't take two picture pieces that don't really go together and just force them to fit. And if you did that with every single piece in the puzzle, it would just be abstract art. In a similar way, building trust, it's a piece by piece, careful, selective process, and each action or choice has to show that your integrity adds up to a coherent picture that the other person can see. One act of reliability might not convince a person to trust you completely. That would be like trying to see 1,000-piece puzzle when you've only put like 5 pieces together. And you can say, and there's an episode of The Big Bang Theory where Raj sends all the other characters on a scavenger hunt. And one of the clues is a puzzle. They have to put together this like 500-piece puzzle. And they all start putting it together, and they all recognize really quickly. They like might have the edges and a few pieces in the middle. They go, "Oh, it's the comic book store. It's the comic book store. We all have to go to the comic book store." And so they each, like, as soon as they agree and recognize that the clue is the comic book store, they don't have to put the whole puzzle together. They've built up enough that they both are seeing the same thing. They agree on the shared vision. They now have enough trust and agreement together to go to the comic book store where they can get the next clue in the scavenger hunt. But Sheldon and Penny, who are paired together in the show, arguably the most intelligent person, most cognitively intelligent person, and one of the most emotionally intelligent people. But he has no emotional intelligence or no social proficiency, but he's very cognitively intelligent. She has high social proficiency, but low cognitive intelligence, right? So they're together. Penny sees it's the comic book store, and he goes, "Yes, it's the comic book store, but what if it's a trick? What if the last piece of the puzzle, when we put it in, is the window of the comic book store, and it has a little sign that says, 'Go to the train store'?" That's possible. It's a plausible hypothesis. And the only way to know for sure that there's no little subtle hint or trick that's in the details is to complete the entire puzzle. So Penny is going, "It's the comic book store. It's the comic book store. It's the comic book store. Let's go. Come on. You're taking forever. What are you doing?" And she's getting frustrated and she's pacing. She wants to flee the room. She wants to get out of the room. She wants to just leave him behind and go on her own. But she doesn't. And I think that's really adorable. Like it's so she's so frustrated. She's so mad, but she doesn't leave her partner behind. And it's not because the rules of the game say that she can't. She actually loves Sheldon and cares about Sheldon a lot. They're friends, and she cares about him, and she wants to win together. She wants to participate in the game together, and she values Sheldon's contributions. Even though for the most of the game, she's ahead of him, right? Like she's like, "Oh, it's the comic book store. Let's go," and she's right. And then at the end, he puts the last piece in, and he kind of looks at it. Even after the puzzle's done, he looks at it. He kind of evaluates it, and he goes, "It's the comic book store. Let's go." And she's like, "Finally!" And they go. They go to the comic book store. Some people are like that, and you just have to have patience with them. They think something's a trick. There's no trick. No one's trying to trick you, right? They think, oh, but this detail, and I have to have the whole picture, and I have to put it all together, and you're just like, oh my God, why can't you see that it's like this? Come on. There's not enough trust in their relationship because Sheldon just doesn't trust Penny. He doesn't trust her vision, even though she's right, even though she saw it well before he did. She looked at part of the picture, extrapolated the whole rest of it, and she was right. But there wasn't enough trust for Sheldon to trust Penny. He thinks, she's not very bright. She doesn't really know. He doesn't trust her intuition. He needs to see every little detail, every puzzle piece in its right place, and then examine individually and the whole thing. And then he'll say, yes, it's the comic book store. Let's go. So patience and trust building means committing to the long haul together. You have to stay together and be together to win it together, and know that every positive step, every right decision, every moment of genuine interaction is another piece of your puzzle. And you might have to wait a long time for someone else to put it all together with you. And that will eventually come from accumulation, their buy-in, their ability to make the decision and to move forward together. It might come from accumulation, and every piece of the puzzle might have to be right. It won't be a single event. It won't be one thing that the light comes on for them. And Penny could probably have dragged Sheldon, right? She's physically stronger than him, right? She could have grabbed him by the ear and dragged him to the comic book store. She could have, but she didn't, right? She was respectful. She was frustrated, but she was respectful of him, and she waited for him. She was patient. I love that scene. I love that scene in the show. It's very moving, very touching to me. So in the last few minutes of the session, that's really it. Those are the 6 things. Authentic communication, value contribution, trustworthy associations, shared values, transparency, and shared interests. So those are the 6 facets of trust building, and it has to be done in the context of building rapport and mutual respect, valuing the other person, valuing their subjective input and all of that, and the humility of not believing you have a monopoly on the perception of objective reality. Unfortunately, lots of people never get to valuing the intersubjective perspective or the intersubjective exchange. They don't get to that because they are so phenomenally arrogant that they actually believe they see things as they are, as they really are. No, I see things as they are. That's your opinion. The truth is, oh my God, watch out, we got a badass over here. The Neil deGrasse Tyson meme. I love that. Oh, watch out. Oh, look out, everybody. We got a badass over here. They see objective reality. Woohoo! Look at you. Look at you. You're a fancy lad, aren't you? You see objective reality. You see the truth. Man. Wow. Your parents must be very proud. Right. Watch out for people like that. The people who see the truth, who know the truth. Watch out. Watch out. Because, newsflash, they don't. Nobody does. They don't. Nobody really sees all of it. No one has the whole picture. You might be like Penny, highly intuitive. You don't need that many pieces of the puzzle to put it all together, and you might be right. But it's not impossible that Sheldon could have been right, that Raj could have hidden a secret clue in the window of the picture of the comic book store. Sheldon very well could have been right. But it turned out Penny was right, right? And what would have been the case if Sheldon had been right? All the other people who played the game the way that Penny played the game, they put just enough pieces of the puzzle together to see it's a picture of the comic book store, and they all relied on their intuition, their and so on, and they all ran to the comic book store. They all would have been wrong, and they all would have had to come back to the puzzle. And they all could have. You lose nothing. You lose nothing by relying on well-informed intuition, right? Experience, wisdom. You lose very little because you can always come back and try again if you fail. You have a hypothesis, you test it. Hypothesis is, I think it's the comic book store. Let's test it by going to the comic book store. Sheldon said, no, let's test it by finishing the puzzle, right? We'll know for sure then. Well, really, there's a reason that he's a theoretical physicist and not a practical physicist in the show. Really, really good writing, really phenomenal writing in that episode, right? The art of building trust through rapport is just it's a beautiful thing. I feel like I could talk about it much longer, but and active listening is such a foundational skill for building trust and establishing rapport. There wasn't a lot of active listening between Sheldon and Penny. Specifically, Sheldon wasn't actively listening to Penny, right? So I did have someone ask me, this segues into one of the questions that I want to deal with before we end, because I have two more questions that I want to make sure we answer before the end of the group coaching session. I haven't intentionally saved them to the very last minute, but it just worked out that way. This person says, can you share a personal experience where active listening significantly impacted my ability to lead or influence others? And how did it change the outcome of the situation? Well, yeah, I could a lot. Like, um, unfortunately, I just kind of want to teach by like a what not to do. Unfortunately, a lot of the time in the past, I have made the mistake of not really actively listening to the other person. Right? That's a recent development. Our children are our spiritual teachers, and I've learned so much from my son. I've learned from him the absolute essential nature of active listening, because a lot of times I would be kind of like Sheldon, really, like, no, let's think it through all the way to the end, have all the pieces together and make the decision, and based on like really planning it out. Let's not listen to intuition. And I haven't given people space to listen to their intuition, fail, and then come back. And so I've been in a lot of those situations where I'm like, fine, okay, we'll do the intuitive thing. Do your best. Do whatever you think is best, whatever, and I'll just largely let people go and kind of make what I perceive to be making their own mistakes. They make their own decisions and make their own choices. And I see it as, you're making a mistake, but go ahead. They're going to make you miserable, but it's your choice to be in that relationship, right? And I will say, make your own choice. And then when they turn out to be wrong, I'll say, I told you. Nobody listens to Noel. It was a mantra for years. When I was about, I don't know, my late 20s, early 30s, I was kind of insufferable, I think, to a lot of people who knew me well and were close to me, because it was always, well, nobody listens to Noel. Nobody listens to Noel. I would say that all the time. Nobody listens to Noel. Why don't you people listen? Why don't you see? Why can't you acknowledge that I see things the way they are? And people were like, no, nobody wants to hear all of that. Nobody wants to hear an I told you so. Nobody likes an I told you so. And I was the biggest of I told you so's. And a lot of the times I was right, but I wasn't always right. And I probably wasn't right as often as I thought I was. But I'll tell you what that did. It destroyed rapport. Being an I told you so, because, it no one has a shared interest in you being right. You're the only one who has an interest in you being right. Nobody else cares, right? It's not one of those things that aligns you. In fact, it kind of pushes you apart. And it doesn't really, it makes you, it's self-centered, it's focused on you, it's not focused on something that you both care about. And you being right is also not a shared value, right? So if you emphasize that and you draw attention to that, people are like, okay, okay, yes, you were right. But really, you're just making me feel bad for being wrong. And so you're right, I'm wrong, I'm stupid, you're smart. Now I don't want to listen to you because you're a jerk, right? So, um, the answer to this question is, um, kind of in the negative, right? Can you share a personal experience where actively listening significantly impacted your ability to lead? Well, not actively listening significantly impacted in a negative way my ability to lead and influence others, and it changed the outcome of a situation by driving people away from me. So some of the relationships that I valued the most, are now damaged, and some of the people I love the most are now estranged. Um, yeah, I'm not really close with either of my sisters, and that's really heartbreaking to me. And I think a large part of that probably has to do with the fact that I've communicated with them in the past. You know, there's this old saying too that intimacy breeds contempt. The more familiar you are with another person, the more you see their flaws, and it takes a lot of love on both sides of a relationship like that to overcome those breakdowns, those flaws, those failings. And you have to remain open and willing to see that the other person really is working on things like self-awareness, building rapport, caring about other people, seeing how the way that they've been has impacted communication. And at a certain point, if someone has adopted a sort of life philosophy that I'm going to let the bridges I burn light my way, then it's not really going to be possible to save those relationships, because the other person has just, they've decided to burn the bridge and it's too far gone. But you also, if you're the person who wants to rebuild the relationship and create rapport and reconnect with the other person, and then they are the bridge burner, like you might find yourself, and we'll talk about this in a later group coaching session. I don't know if it'll be next week, but I've got it all planned out. um, It'll probably be a few weeks later, a few weeks hence. What do you do? Because that's the situation where we talked about, right? Where building rapport and building trust with that person is one step forward and two steps back, and it's always going to be that way as long as they see you, through the lens of all the labels they've put on you, and they're not really seeing you. Well, what you have to do is get really patient and acknowledge that, they don't trust you and they don't like you, and that that may have started out being your fault, but it's actually their problem now. It's actually on them because they're seeing you in an unhealthy way, in an inaccurate way, in a way that's restricted by lots of unhealthy walls and barriers that they have erected, and you don't have any control over that, and that's their problem, right? It's their wall to take down. It's not a healthy boundary, it's a barrier, right? And that's not your fault. It may have initially been started out as a boundary, but because bitterness and resentment can build those things up, it's now about a barrier. They have to take that down. You just have to be patient and make sure that the good interactions are really good and the negative interactions are not so much. And that you, if there is a negative interaction, you do something quickly and effectively to try to ameliorate that and repair it. The final question in this last, well, we're out of time right now, but I'm going to stick it out for another couple of minutes and just answer this last question. Um, was how do you sustain your commitment to trust building in the face of challenges or setbacks? So, I mean, kind of right on theme with what we've been talking about. It's love. I don't know what to tell you. You have to love the other person, and you might be like, "Well, that's weird in the workplace." It's not, right? Because I'm not talking about a romantic love or even a family love. You don't have to love people like their family when they're just coworkers. That's not reasonable. To love another person is to will the good of the other, to will another person's good, to want what's good for them, not what they want. It's not wanting what they want. It's not, adopting all of their values as if they're your own. or agreeing with them about everything or sharing all of their interests. That's not what I mean. It's not wanting what they want. That's not what I mean by loving the other person or caring about them. All that it takes to be friends with someone, to love the other person, to have charity for them, what we call Christian charity, right? To have charity for them, that kind of love is just to want what is best for them, to want for them what God wants for them. And you start this by seeing the other person through God's eyes. Some people talk about this as the practice of empathy. I don't think that's correct. I don't think empathy, in the sense that Adam Smith talked about sympathy, and the modern term empathy, I don't think that's what we're talking about. It's not just walking a mile in the other man's moccasins. It's not that. It's not just putting yourself in their shoes, because every time you do that, that's an exercise of your imagination. You're just imagining what you think it might be like to be them. And when you do that, you bring with you all your judgments about who they are and how they are and all of that. So you're not really seeing them the way that they are, even though you imagine that that's what you're doing, but you're not, because it's all just an exercise of imagination. And you're bringing your perspective about who they are and how they are and what they are to this imaginary exercise of what it might be like to be them. And that's why empathy falls down, because you bring with you all your judgments about them. Even when you try not to, you can't. You have implicit bias, right? So you bring with you all of your own perspective. You're never really free of your own perspective, right? But if you try to look at the other person through God's eyes, then you're doing this in the most loving way possible and in the most merciful way possible, the most forgiving way possible. You're looking at this other person with infinite love and mercy and forgiveness and compassion. And you still are seeing all of their faults and all of their flaws. You still see them, and you may still even judge them. But where there's judgment, there's an answer in mercy. And where there is a falling down, a falling short, there's compassion and there's forgiveness. Because love covers over a multitude of sins. And if we really truly believe that God is love, then the way that you have the patience to get through the setbacks is love, a divine love. So meditate in that, like meditate in that love, connect to the divine, connect to God, and connect to other people through that lens. That has to be the way, because there's not enough empathy in the world. There's not enough sympathy in the world to bridge the chasm between you and others that you dislike. And here is a hard truth. You only love God as much as you love the person you most despise. Let me say that again. You only love God as much as you love the person you most despise. Jesus said, what you have done to the least of these other people, the person you regard the least, you've also done to me. Not my words, right? Red letter text. So maybe you're not a Christian. Maybe you don't believe that. Maybe you just want to dismiss me as a religious quack. Fine. I don't care. That's fine. I accept your judgment. How's that working out for you? I'm not here to be right. I'm here to help. I'm not here to judge you. I'm here to try to help you move forward in your life. And hopefully these perspectives will. If they don't, great, try something else. But this is what I've got for you this week. I hope that it's helpful. I hope that these lessons help you build greater trust and help you get more agreement and more consent and more buy-in and more people authentically following where you want to lead them. And hopefully you're leading them in a great direction that's built on, virtue and understanding and altruism and all these wonderful things. um, if you want more lessons that are in alignment with this one, then get my book. You can buy Lead Again. Again, it's on Amazon. You can also sign up for our Rise Above group coaching. So the Rise Above group coaching is available. We do these free sessions every week. Just sign up next week for another one of these free sessions. We also have, in addition to the book, Rise Above one-on-one coaching for individuals and team coaching for leadership teams. That's all available through our website at counselandclarity.com. And you can just contact me using the QR code in the upper corner here of the stream. You can just contact me for a free consultation. If you're interested in that and you're like, Noel, I want you to come and talk to our board or talk to our leadership team, talk to our management group. And we're tired of having employees that we have to constantly manage. And we really want them to be motivated to do stuff on their own without us having to constantly be coming up with new incentive plans and new programs and new rules and policies and all that stuff. Right? The most efficient way to lead a business is to motivate people, to lead people to want to do things on their own without you having to make them want to do it. And that means building rapport with them and building buy-in, right, for your ideas. And I can't just come and make people want to do stuff in your business. Nobody can do that. It's like the genie, right? You can't wish for more wishes. You can't wish to make people fall in love with you, right? That's what it is. You can't make people fall in love with you. You can't make people love your business or love your ideas. No one will ever love those things. No one will ever love you more than you love you, except for God, right? No one will ever love your business more than you love your business because it's your business. You own it. And aside from like sharing ownership equally and getting them as pumped as you are about the underlying principles of your business, which you may, even if you shared all the ownership in your business equally, there still are going to be some of your co-owners that still aren't going to be as motivated as you are because they're not as passionate as you are about your ideas. But that doesn't mean that you can't build rapport and build trust. And I certainly can coach you on and your team on how to do that and how to make that happen. I absolutely can and would love to have the opportunity to do that. So if that's what you're interested in, then start with the book, read it. I hope you enjoy it. I hope it serves you well. I've got a couple of early copies, the proof copies. If you want one of those, I have 2 left. I'll be happy to sign one, make it out, sign it out to you in a nice personal way and send it out to you. So just connect with me if you want that. We're about 10 minutes over today, but this one was close to my heart. I mean, so you might go back and watch the replay. I feel like I got a little emotional. So, and I'm not sorry about that. I don't think that's weak. I think there's strength in vulnerability, and that's on brand for me, at least the new me. Well, I used to hate my emotions and not want to ever display them, and I saw that as very weak. But things are different now, and that's good. It's a good different. So thanks for tuning in this week. If you liked it, please share this with your friends the next time it comes up in your channel. And it will Tuesday or Wednesday of next week. I'll send out another message here on LinkedIn. I'll send out another batch of invites. And if you got value out of this, share it. It's open to everybody and it's free to everybody. And anyone who has a legal question or a leadership question, they can send that to me or drop it in a comment in the chat, and I'll do my best to get it answered. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next week, and